Welcome to Melbourne High School Library Tutorials. This tutorial will teach you how to understand your task. What does this mean? When you get an assignment or a project, you're given a task or a question. Understanding the task is the most crucial part of the assignment. If you don't understand the task, then you're not going to get full marks for the assignment. You need to look at what you're being asked to do. Often students rush into the research, write out as much as they can, and try and cram all that information into their assignment. This is not the way to be successful in a project or an assignment. It's not about how much you know, it's about how well you've answered the question of the task. In fact, sometimes students have spent many hours collecting information and cramming it all in, and if they haven't understood what the task is actually trying to get them to do, then they don't get really good marks. So make sure that you don't skip this when you start your project. I'm going to take you through 3 steps that you need, and these steps are really easy to understand and easy to remember, so with practice it will become something that you just naturally do. As an example, I've chosen the Year 10 Biotechnology research project, and I've put it into a sentence, 2 sentences. So what you need to do is examine a current issue in biotechnology using a primary news article as well as information from at least 3 sources that support or contradict the primary news article. Create a 6 to 9 minute video documentary that examines issues presented in your news article. Now you can see straight off that it's not straightforward. There's not just one thing to do. There are 2, if you look at the verbs examine and create, and there are different parts to the first section at least. So we're going to go through this. Step 1 is, what are you being asked about? That might sound obvious, but it's really easy to miss aspects of your task, especially if, as in this case, the task is made up of multiple parts. Sometimes you really need to unpack it, take it apart, and have a look at exactly what you need to do, otherwise you're going to miss bits. What I've got here is just one way that you could do that. What I've done first of all is written out the question or the task. I've highlighted in different colours all the different things that you're supposed to do. So the first thing that stands out is you need to find and examine a current issue in biotechnology. You also need to find and use a primary news article. You also need to get information from at least 3 sources that support or contradict the primary news article. So it's quite complicated, and you really need to take your time for this to sink in. Once you've done your research, you actually have to create a 3 to 9 minute video documentary, and this documentary has to examine the issues presented in your news article. So what I've got here is a table, and basically I've just pulled out all of those things that I've highlighted, and underneath I've written the first thing that comes to mind, or possibly the first few things that I found when I do a quick search, just to get this process started and to have an idea of what we need. So in terms of current issue in biotechnology, I've written down 2. Of course, you can create more options for that. So I've got affordability in stem cell research, primary news article. I might have found an article that talks about the rising cost of healthcare and that addresses affordability. I might have found an article that talks about roadblocks from religious groups in terms of stem cell research. What I've also noticed is that with the 3 sources, the suggestion is that they support or contradict the issues that you're looking at and the primary news article. In terms of the video documentary, you note how long so that you have an understanding of how much you need, because you might not have enough or you might actually have too much information and you're wasting your time. Issues in the news article to be used in the video documentary, which you choose from the issues you've researched. And again, that is something that you do once you have all your information, bearing in mind that it's a 6 to 9 minute documentary. You might have to select some parts and leave some parts out. So now we're up to step 2. What are you being asked to use? That means you have to identify all the sources, the issues, the materials and examples that you're being asked to refer to. And sometimes the materials you need to use will be explicitly stated in the question, but other times you'll be able to choose your own source. So in this context, you'll definitely have to use a primary news article, and you should start thinking about where you would find this. A news article, obviously a newspaper. We have newspapers, some newspapers online through our LibGuides. Databases might contain this primary news article, or Google Scholar. Then, of course, the 3 other sources, you have to think about where you might find these. If it's not a primary news article, you might want a variety of sources. So again, you might look through the databases, or you might find something in a blog post. Obviously, it would be a blog post written by a scientist or someone who's an expert in the field, or maybe find a scientific paper. In terms of the video recording, you should start thinking about the fact that you need some technology skills. Think about your design skills and also your verbal skills, because you might be speaking. Well, you obviously be speaking. Now we come to the 3rd step, and that is, what are you being asked to do? Do being the active verb. You need to establish what you need to do to answer the topic. So you've done all the research. What do you have to do with it? So you don't just find information, you examine the current issue related to biotechnology. The task actually implies breadth, because you're using at least 4 sources. One is the primary news article, and also in terms of providing more than one side of the issue, where you're either supporting or contradicting, and providing a comparison between more than one source, compare and contrast. So it's not enough to simply write down everything you know about the topics and sources you've identified. Remember, you're being assessed on how well you answer the question, not how much you know about the topic. Look at the verbs again. Examine the current issue. Compare and contrast the issue from different perspectives. Okay, let's have a look at what your instruction words are. The instruction words you must identify in order to find out what you need to do. Sometimes you get a task that already identifies an instruction word, tells you what to do with the information, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's implied. So the instruction word is the verb in your question or task, and make sure you follow this instruction throughout your essay. And keep track of this. Keep coming back to it and checking, is this what I'm doing? So in this example, with examine, you're also comparing and contrasting, and therefore you're evaluating, that's implied, and you're creating. Here's a summary of some of the instruction words. Analyze, compare, contrast, describe, discuss, evaluate, examine, explain, summarize. We have more of these in our LibGuides in the academic writing section. Here I've got a table where I've actually inserted the verbs. That is what you're actually doing with the information. So I've got in orange, examine or evaluate, compare, contrast, and create. That's just to remind you again what you're doing with every bit that you've recorded in the chart. So you could even use the same chart without all the extra information to record the sources for your bibliography. And the bibliography generally does need the author, the title, if it's a book, the publisher, the year, definitely the URL as well if you're looking at the website. So that's the end of this tutorial. Just to sum up, the 3 things that you have learnt now that you need to establish about your task are: what are you being asked about? What are you being asked to use? And what are you being asked to do? Thank you for listening.